Okay, so this little 14-core mini PC is definitely putting out some really great gaming performance. Being able to run a game like this at 1440p high settings on such a small unit is pretty awesome. Hey, what's going on everybody? It's ETA Prime back here again. Today we're going to be checking out this brand new mini gaming PC that I recently picked up on AliExpress, known as the G2 Edge. If you do a quick search over on the website, you'll see that several different people are selling these on AliExpress. You can also pick them up on Amazon and eBay, but those are going to be a bit more expensive. So I went with this one from AliExpress and I picked up a bare bones model. But on paper, this should be putting out some really great performance given its form factor, because we've got an NVIDIA RTX 3050 GPU. They also have these listed with a few different CPU options, but I kind of went with the mid-range, and we'll talk about the full specs in a second. But before we get into that, I do want to mention that this video is brought to you by URCD keys. I've actually been using this site for a couple years now. They do offer Steam keys, Origin, Uplay. They even offer Microsoft applications like Office, but the main reason that I use URCD keys is for their Windows keys. Right now, their Windows 10 Pro OEM key is $19.84, but if you use code ETA at checkout, you can get 25% off. And another great thing about buying from here is they do accept PayPal. I just did this build here. I need to activate Windows. I'm going to head over to my updates and security. We're going to go to activation. As you can see, I've got Windows 10 Pro, but it's not activated. So I'm going to change product key. I'm going to paste it in here, choose next, choose activate, and Windows is now activated. We're ready to go. My warning is totally gone, and basically that's it. They'll email your code once your payment is processed, and that's basically it. If you're interested in picking up cheap Windows 10 keys for your new PC builds, I'll leave a link in the description. So inside of the box, obviously, we're going to get the mini PC. It also comes with a stand because this is meant to sit vertically. We've got the hardware to mount the stand up. Some SATA power and data cables here because it will support one 2.5-inch drive internally, and it comes with a 150 watt power supply. Now the GPU in here can pull up to 95 watts. The CPU itself is around the 65 watt part when it's set up correctly. So we're kind of right there on the edge, and by the end we'll do some power testing just to see if we've got enough wattage here from this included PSU. When it comes to I/O, up front here we've got two USB 2.0 ports. Would have been nice if these were 3.0, but moving around back, we've got one USB Type-C port. As far as I can tell, this is 3.2. It does support video out. And from the BIOS and Windows, there's no mention of Thunderbolt 3 or Thunderbolt 4. Two full-size HDMI ports, and these will support 4K 60 out. 4 USB 3.0 ports, gigabit Ethernet, we've got our mic in, our mic out, and at the very bottom we've got our power input. So for this G2 Edge, I opted to pick up the bare bones unit because I've got RAM and storage laying around. They do kind of charge an arm and a leg, but you can get this with a 2 terabyte drive and I believe up to 64 gigabytes of RAM from the factory if you want to. But for my setup, I'm just going to be adding 16 gigabytes of DDR4 running at 3200 megahertz in dual channel, and a PCIe 4.0 2 terabyte M.2 SSD. Not much that we can upgrade here, but we can go up to 64 gigabytes of RAM and add 2 M.2 SSDs. We've got dual slots in here. One of them supports PCIe 3.0, the other supports PCIe 4.0, and this did come pre-installed with the Wi-Fi 6/Bluetooth 5 card. When it comes to cooling the CPU and GPU, we've got a dual fan heatsink setup here. Very similar to what you'd find in a laptop, because after all, I mean, when it comes down to it, this has got similar specs to a laptop, but we just don't have a screen on it. And like we saw with the unboxing, it does support a 2.5-inch drive. You're going to mount it right over here on the side cover. To tell you the truth, this mini PC looks a lot better than I thought it was gonna. You know, just taking a look at the pictures online. It is constructed of plastic, but I kind of like the design they've come up with. And we've got some RGB up front. I know some people aren't into this. You can always unplug it internally if you want to, but it does add a little bit to this PC. For the CPU, we've got the Intel Core i7-12700H, but keep in mind you can go up to the i9-12900H. Not sure how much better performance we're going to get paired up with the RTX 3050, so I went with kind of the mid-range here. And with this, we have 14 cores, 20 threads, 6 performance cores up to 4.7 GHz, and 8 efficiency cores up to 3.5. We can still access the built-in Intel Iris Xe iGPU, but we've got that RTX 3050 laptop GPU. It is a 95 watt part, so it's a full boat mobile RTX 3050, and we've got 4 GB of GDDR6 VRAM. I've just added 16 GB of DDR4, it's SODIMM RAM running at 3200 MHz. We've got one M.2 PCIe 4.0 slot, one M.2 PCIe 3.0 slot, and that 2.5 inch drive, so we can actually add plenty of storage to this thing. It also has Wi-Fi 6 and Bluetooth 5.0, and for all of my testing, I'm going to be running Windows 11 Pro. And here it is. So I've been up and running for a little while now. I've installed a bunch of games that we're going to be testing out. We're also going to run some benchmarks, but it's definitely a snappy system. That 12700H is a really good CPU, given that we've got those 14 cores, and it'll basically power through anything once it's set at the correct TDP. And by the way, this has a 45 watt TDP with a boost up to 65. We can use Intel tuning utility to go up a bit higher if you want to, but with that 150 watt power supply, I think we're kind of right there at that sweet spot, especially given the fact that the RTX 3050 can do up to 95 watts in this thing. And so far, I've been really impressed with the overall performance, just kind of sitting here using it as an everyday PC. If you wanted to do some 4K video playback, web browsing, it's going to work just fine, but this is meant to be a gaming PC, so let's go ahead and test out some games. First up, we've got Forza Horizon 5. Right now, we're at 1440p high settings, and we can get an average of 74 FPS out of this game. No DLSS is enabled or anything like that, not using any kind of resolution scaling. And yeah, I've been having a lot of fun playing this game on this little mini PC at 1440p, getting some absolutely amazing performance. We're definitely going to be testing out some more games, but the first thing I wanted to take a look at were a few benchmarks that I ran. First up, we've got Geekbench 5 coming in with a single core of 1676, multi-9071. I know 13th gen is out and Ryzen 7000, but these 12th gen Intel mobile CPUs are still putting down some really great power. Moving over to some GPU benchmarks with 3D Mark Night Raid, 36,848. I also ran Firestrike and we got a 12,072. So yeah, I mean, with these synthetics not looking bad at all given the form factor here, but these are synthetic benchmarks, and now it's time to test out some more real world gaming. And first up, we've got Spider-Man Miles Morales. High settings, 1080p, we can get an average of around 72 FPS. Now, if you need more out of it, you can always enable DLSS, but this is looking great here at 1080p. I don't mind playing it just like it is. And that average of 72 is out in the city here. Obviously, when you're up above the street, it jumps up to around 90, and indoors it's over 100. But yeah, I mean, it's really playable on this mini PC. Moving over to God of War, high settings, 1080p. This is one that I would probably enable DLSS. I could see this maybe dipping under 60 in some very intense cases. So DLSS set to either quality or performance will significantly boost that FPS and just keep you over that 60 mark. Or you could go with a high-medium mix. It's really up to you. Here's Cyberpunk 2077, and with this one I did have to enable DLSS, and I actually took it down to medium settings. At high with no DLSS, we got an average of around 54 FPS. Obviously, at high we could go up to performance with that DLSS setting, but I'd say medium quality looks really good, and we're getting an average of 75 FPS. Going into Elden Ring, I figured I'd have to drop these settings down to like a medium-low mix, just knowing how hard this game is to run, but we're at 1080p high and we're at 60. I actually didn't expect it to run this well. I know the 12700H has more than enough power. I was just kind of worried about that RTX 3050 with this one. When it comes to fighting games, I've tested MK11 and Injustice 2. 1080p maxed out here with Injustice 2, and with MK11 I did have to take it just to high settings, but it still looks great and fully playable at 60. And with something like Street Fighter V, it wouldn't be an issue to go up to 1440p maxed out with that game. I personally still love playing GTA 5, so I kind of wanted to throw this in here. 1080p, very high, average of 136 FPS. There's no doubt in my mind that we could actually take this up to 1440p, but the monitor I was connected to is only 1080, so I really didn't get a chance. But given the age of the game and the fact that you really don't need much to run this anymore, I'm pretty sure we'd be able to take that resolution way up. And the final one I tested here was Dirt 5, 1080p. This is a very hard game to run on lower end GPUs, so I did have to drop this down to a high-medium mix, but we're actually up there over 80 on average. So this is another one of those racing games that's going to perform absolutely amazing on this PC. So like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, this comes with a 150 watt power supply. Now the GPU alone is a 95 watt part. It can pull up to 95 watts, totally maxed out. The CPU in this is set at 65, so already we're right there at the edge. And with these mini PCs, I always like to test total system power consumption. So at idle, we're around 21 watts, average gaming 128. And for the maximum test here, I actually used a separate power supply. I went with a 240 watt power supply just to see if we could go over 150. And sure enough, this can pull 180 watts from the wall. I will admit that that's an extreme test, and while gaming and everyday normal use, you're never going to hit that wattage. I do think they should have included a higher wattage power supply just in case. So overall, I'm really impressed with the performance this mini PC's putting out. Now obviously there's not much we can upgrade in this. We can add more RAM, we can add more storage, but we're kind of stuck there with the same CPU and GPU. There are other mini PCs on the market that you can pick up and upgrade the GPU in, but you gotta work with a low profile, and right now the A2000 is the best low profile dual slot GPU on the market, and it's right there with the 3050, but with overclocking, the A2000 can definitely beat something like this out. But either way you look at it, it's definitely a true mini gaming PC. I mean, everything we threw at this worked really well at 1080p, and older stuff is going to work at 1440. You want to go back a little more, lower some settings, you could go up to 4K on this RTX 3050 powered mini PC. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. Really appreciate you watching.